the Watchers decree on Babylon, America. And our lesson's text is from Daniel chapter 4. The primary text is verse 16 and 17 of chapter 4 of Daniel, which states, "Let his heart be changed from man's, and let a beast heart be given unto him, and let 7 times pass over him. This matter is by the decree of the Watchers, and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the bases of men." This week, beloved, most of the nations were represented by their leaders in New York City. These men were looked upon as the so-called shot callers of world geopolitics as they gathered together at the United Nations, giving their positions on where the world should be and who the world should be against and who the world should support. And everybody looked at this gathering as the pinnacle of power on this planet. And even the one leader who didn't make it, but he sent his representative from Russia, his ambassador from Russia, to come and speak on his behalf. And they all were gathered there with the intention that they need to run the world better than they run it now. They talked about expanding the council of the Security Council to more permanent members and the opportunity for more non-permanent members. And they considered themselves to be the bastion and gatekeepers of world affairs. Our lesson tonight is going to show us they are not. Even right now, there are those who are saying one leader has his finger on the button. If people invade territory in Ukraine that he acquired by invasion, that he will push the button if anybody tries to take it from him, as though he and his people in Russia have the power to make or break the world. Tonight, we're going to see the lesson of a man who thought he was the one that could make or break the world. And Yah gave him a revelation that he wasn't like what he thought he was. And least any of you become afraid that you need to buy iodine tablets and start building fallout shelters in case of a nuclear war. I want you to understand something tonight. We're going to look at who really runs the world tonight. And we're going to see that man is not really the one who runs the world. They gathered to talk about the world problems and the damage to the world the war in Ukraine would have. Yet you and I know that we wrestle not with flesh and blood in this world, but we wrestle or combat with principalities and powers of spiritual wickedness. And though Biden stood up as what some said was the most powerful man in the world, as he gave his speech, nonetheless, we understand that the confusion, the chaos of this world is not from flesh and blood, but ultimately behind the scenes in the shadows of world government and secret societies and shadow governments and the Illuminati is the real culprit who we wrestle with, Hashatan himself. And the scriptures tell us in Revelation chapter 16 that he will speak out of his mouth demonic spirits that will invade the hearts and minds of leaders of the earth to want to spark the flame of Armageddon any moment now. And so tonight we're going to see that even beyond Hashatan, there are a race of beings that are known and called the Watchers. The Watchers were renowned and known to be these watchers on behalf of the kingdom government of Yah over all the earth. And they speak by the decree from the throne of Yah himself in the affairs of man. And you need to take comfort tonight that your destiny and future is not in the hands of how Mr. Putin or Mr. Biden determines they're going to make peace. Because the watchers already have served notice. There's some things that have to happen about you, Israel, and that you have a purpose. And we understand in Revelation 12, the adversary, when he saw you were about to birth forth as a nation, he tried to devour you before you could birth forth as a nation. And so we see the threat of a nuclear annihilation challenge put before us. But scriptures tonight are going to show us man is not in control. The Yah is in control. But we see, as in verse 16, it said of Daniel chapter 4, let his heart be changed from a man and let a beast heart be given to him. You're going to see leaders like Putin that are going to do things that just don't make sense. Why talk about destroying people with a nuclear weapon when that very weapon can destroy you, and it will destroy you from the other side? Whether yours makes it quicker to the other side or not, it's still going to reach you. You see, this is a lesson tonight we're going to see that is going to become predominant among the world leaders, as profound, as important as they looked, as they came sitting in the Security Council. I remember in my time visiting New York City in 1984, and I was doing a summer internship, a ministry internship in the Bronx. So I took a tour of the United Nations there in New York that summer. And I went into the chamber where the United Nations meet. And I went into the chamber and saw where they sat, where they show on TV. And I was really struck by how small it really looked. When I looked at it on TV, it looked like this is a huge auditorium for huge people of power in the earth. And I looked at it and I saw it didn't look so big. And those that sit behind those desks that got the names of nations in front of them, it dawned on me they're not as big in the world as they think. And then on the other level of the building, I went to the meditation room. I figured with all of these international leaders and representatives, that the meditation room would have different insignia of the different religions of each of them. I thought I might see on one wall a cross, another a crescent moon, and various other signs and symbols of the nations represented there, whose religions would be represented. And I got into the meditation room there, and there was nothing on the walls anywhere except one mural. There was a mural on the wall, and the only thing that was in the mural was an eye. An eye, just like the eye you see on the back of the dollar bill. It was very prominently there. And I realized that was the eye of Lucifer, the eye of Baal. And I realized and understood that this is the house of Satan. And he's trying to set up the world to be ruled by his man, the beast that's coming, and the common name Antichrist. So we are in those times, beloved, where the rulers of the world are now under the guidance of Satan so hard they don't know it, and CNN doesn't know it, MSNBC and ABC and all the news services of the world, they don't know what's really going on behind the scenes. But hallelujah, praise God for the word of Yah, that we know from the real shapers and movers of this world, politics, is a council of beings called the Watchers, who watch all that you see on TV and see all beyond TV and the closed secret gatherings and communications between nations. And so we see tonight in our lesson an example, a microcosm of time, where the king of Babylon, the America of ancient time, Nebuchadnezzar, is getting ready to learn the great lesson that even though he was the most powerful man on the planet in that time, 2,500 years ago, or at least he thought he was, that he was not all powerful, that there were a council of beings who served over the Almighty Yah himself, that are the real shapers and movers. And even Hashatan can only do what he's allowed to do if he gets permission from Yah to do it. He can't just strike out and destroy the world through Putin just because he wants to do it. And so tonight we're going to look at this lesson from chapter 4 of Daniel. It is a reading that we keep emphasizing in the different chapters of Daniel, where we're understanding that reading Daniel is opening us up to circumstances that happened 2,500 years ago that are reminiscent of things we're seeing in these latter days. So it's a time microcosm of ancient Babylon during the rule of its king Nebuchadnezzar II, when the Hebrews were in the midst of the 70-year Babylonian captivity, roughly between the years of 606 BC and 536 BC. Yah revealed another dream to King Nebuchadnezzar here in chapter 4 of Daniel. Now, this is the second dream that Yah revealed to Nebuchadnezzar during the time of the Hebrew prophet Daniel. As cited previously, our interpretations of the historic events recorded in the book of Daniel are for the benefit of guidance and wisdom for us Israelites living in this latter-day Babylon America, as we have cited previously in Romans chapter 15, verse 4. For whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope. Also, as alluded to in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11, which states, now all these things happen unto them for examples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. And so as cited in Romans 15:4 and 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11, these scriptures in Daniel regarding the Israelites' plight in captivity in the ancient times of the Babylonian Empire are meant to be a benefit for our understanding and wisdom in dealing with our current circumstances and tribulations that we face now in this latter-day American Babylon. So this second dream in chapter 4 of Daniel that Yah gives to King Nebuchadnezzar, as recorded here in in chapter 4 of Daniel, it is a prophetic dream that carries in it a contemporary meaning from Nebuchadnezzar's time, from which we can glean prophetic insights for understanding the plans of Yah for Israelites and the world in these latter days. In Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11, Yah declared by his servant, the prophet Jeremiah, these words to the Israelites in Babylonian captivity in the time of Daniel. Verse 11, for I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith Yah, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. That is, Yah saying, you should not be caught off guard by anything that comes up in the news that could make you fear or make you panic on where the world is headed, because Yah said, I have an expected end for you. You must seek the scriptures to see. Unless you do that, you'll run around like a chicken with its head cut off, or like little Chicken Little saying the sky is falling, and won't know what's really going on. So from Jeremiah 29, verse 11, which was spoken to Israelites living in Babylon in the time of Daniel, reminiscent of how you're living in American Babylon in this time. So from this verse, in this time, we can see the parallel promise of blessings to us from what Yah promised to Israelites in the time of Daniel's captivity in ancient Babylon. In tonight's lesson, we will see some portents of things to come on America that are prophetically symbolized in Daniel chapter 4. All right, picking up in Daniel chapter 4, verse 1 through 3, it states, Nebuchadnezzar, the king unto all people, nations, languages that dwell on the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. In verse 1, we can see Nebuchadnezzar's talking like he's at the United Nations, to all the nations of the world, because he's the most powerful man on the planet. And so all the nations of the world want to hear what he's got to say, because in one way or another, what he says will impact everybody on the planet. However, he's going to learn he wasn't as big and important to the world as he thought he was. Verse 2, he says, I thought it good to show the signs and wonders that the Most High have wrought toward me. How great are his signs, and how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. In verses 1 through 3, Nebuchadnezzar is celebrating a breakthrough of understanding he had reached regarding the eternal sovereign rule of the kingdom of Yah as it was revealed to him by the decree of the watchers. And I'm here to serve notice to you today. Those same watchers in his time are still present in this time. These are eternal beings. And so we read in verses 1 through 3, Nebuchadnezzar celebrates this breakthrough of understanding that he had reached regarding the eternal sovereign rule of the kingdom of Yah. I know we love to say cliches that Yah is in control, while at the same time our hearts are churning with fear. But really, this lesson should equip us with that confidence when this world is being frightened through its madmen. Nothing more frightening than a madman that got control of nuclear missiles. That's what you got right now in Russia, a madman. Even President Obama and President Bush and others who knew him before he got to this point said something is different about Putin. Even his buddy Trump said there's something different about him. Yeah, there's something different about him. He overreached how powerful he thought he was. And now he's becoming an example. But oh, hallelujah. In our lesson we saw in the past few weeks ago, we said in the days of Gog, the ruler of Magog, the Russian people, in these days, Yah will restore the covenant back to you and me. So whatever we see that's frightening about him, we should be rejoicing as Israelites, because what we read in that lesson from Leviticus chapter 26 in the Targum text, where Yah says, I will not forget you in the days of God, which is the title of the ruler of Russia. I will not forget you, but I will remember my covenant with you that I made with your father Abraham when I passed through the pieces of the sacrifices to confirm the covenant that I would give his seed the land of promise. And so in the Targum text of Leviticus 26, Yah says, I will remember my covenant that I made with your father Abraham in the days of God, when Russia is raising up its head. These are those times. We have an expected end. We don't have a tragic end. We have an expected end because Yah is a covenant-keeping Elohim. In tonight's lesson, we will see some portents of things that are going to come on America that are prophetically symbolized in Daniel chapter 4. So we're going to see some of this tonight. And also, we're going to pick up where Nebuchadnezzar comes to see the influence of the power of Yah over the world more than himself, more than any alliances he has with other nations. Because in this time when he gets this dream, Nebuchadnezzar was the most powerful man in the world, because he was the sovereign king of the most powerful nation kingdom of Babylon, which was the most powerful kingdom in the world at that time. Yet, in verse 1 of chapter 4 of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar makes an urgent announcement to all mankind. Nebuchadnezzar the king, unto all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. And in verse 2, Nebuchadnezzar declares to the world that the Most High Elohim had shown to him wonderful, wonderful signs. He states in verse 2, I thought it was good to show the signs and wonders that the Most High Elohim have wrought towards me. And then in verse 3, Nebuchadnezzar declares to all mankind what the summation of the glorious revelations meant that Yah had shown him, when he said, how great are his signs, in verse 3, how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. The great witness of King Nebuchadnezzar to all mankind was to testify, as we shall see later, that the kingship and kingdom of the Most High was greater than he and his kingdom of Babylon, which was the most powerful kingdom on the earth at that time. But Nebuchadnezzar declared in verse 3 regarding the kingdom of Yah, the Yah's kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, which means Nebuchadnezzar knew his kingdom was not everlasting. America is not an everlasting, powerful kingdom. And also Nebuchadnezzar said the Yah's dominion and control is from generation to generation. Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom would never control throughout all of human history, nor will America. There's never a generation where Yah is not in control over the world and sovereign. Nebuchadnezzar being a very proud and arrogant king of Babylon, because it was the most powerful world empire at that time, it's stunning that this arrogant king acknowledges publicly to all the world that the kingdom of the Elohim of Israel is greater than the kingdom of Babylon. That is, he's saying even the gods of Babylon that he worshiped, like the eye on the back of the dollar bill, the eye in the meditation room in the United Nations, the eye of Lucifer, the eye of the devil, which symbolizes the Luciferic world rulership. Yet the kingdom of Yah is greater than that. So too, beloved, as we are Hebrew captives in Babylon, America, which is the most powerful nation on earth today. And as the nation that enslaved us, we should clearly be able to see the parallel prophetic meaning between this Babylonian captivity in America with that of the Hebrew captivity of ancient Babylon in the time of King Nebuchadnezzar. This lesson tonight in Daniel 4 is to illustrate how before we return to our homeland of Israel, Yah will likewise reveal and compel the leadership of this powerful and proud nation of America to acknowledge that the kingdom of the Elohim of its Hebrew captives is greater than America. The proud Trump mega people today in America, just like Nebuchadnezzar, will eventually have a rude awakening as to who Yah and his true Israelite people are. This will be a very frightening revelation to America, which to them, they thought by being strategic partners with the Zionist state of Israel, that they were in league with the Most High. They did not realize, when you look at the symbol on the flag of the Zionist state of Israel, that symbol, that six-pointed star, had nothing to do with the Elohim of the true Israel. That six-pointed star was a symbol of the god of Babylon, who had different names as Saturn or Kion. So it's a symbol of the gods of Babylon that's on the flag of the state of Israel. And a lot of American Christians and evangelical right-wing Bible thumpers just want to support the state of Israel, and the state of Israel has as its flag the symbol of the god of Babylon, the six-pointed star. That's where that six-pointed star came from. It came from Nebuchadnezzar and ancient Babylon's pantheon of gods. So you can see in their listing their confusion all over the internet as they are talking about the red heifers that they cite from the state of Israel. The red heifers described in Numbers chapter 19 have been transported to Israel. And there's a lot of evangelical Christians and all flocking to go to Israel right now so that they can see something that's going to happen with the Temple Institute of the Zionist state of Israel. They plan to do something with those red heifers this fall feast season that we're getting ready to come into starting this Sunday. I don't know what they're planning to do, but they're talking about how important it is. And yet Yah is going to reveal to America the Elohim of the Zionist state of Israel is not the true Elohim of Israel. That's the Elohim of the devil, the Antichrist. That's who their Elohim is, because nothing in those sacrifices they're going to do with those red heifers will be pointing or being cited as having anything to do with Yeshua HaMashiach, who they not only reject, but they blaspheme. You see the deception, and Yah saying, now I'm not a prophet, but it appears the stage is right for Yah to make a manifestation this fall feast season. And so let us be in prayer. I'm not a prophet, but I'm seeing things are going on, and I'm looking at these witnesses, and I'm hearing the testimony of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, who subscribed to the same gods that worked with the United Nations, the same gods that work with the United States, and the same gods that are represented by the six-pointed star on the flag of the state of Israel. All of these are Babylonian signs and symbols from Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, and yet he came to see the true Elohim of the true Israelites when it was all said and done. So we ought to be excited to really want to study chapter 4 tonight. And this is a prelude to a frightening revelation to America. That no, it's not the Elohim of the United Nations. No, it's not the Elohim on the back of the dollar bill whose eye is there. And no, it's not the Elohim of the six-pointed star on the flag of the state of Israel that got all power. It's the Elohim of the true children of Israel that they brought as slaves to the new Babylon, America. So we pick up here at verse 4. Just as Nebuchadnezzar describes what he saw that woke him up. And I believe there's something God's getting ready to do that's going to wake up the nations of the world. I don't know, and I'm not setting a date, but there's something he's about to do that's going to wake up the world about you and me, saints. That's going to really astound the world. But I don't know when. I just can feel it. I can sense it. I may be wrong, but I am keeping my eyes and ears open. It bears watching. Nebuchadnezzar says in verse 4, I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house and flourishing in my palace. And I saw a dream which made me afraid. And the thoughts upon my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. Therefore made I a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known unto me the interpretation of the dream. Then came in the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers, and I told the dream before them, but they did not make known unto me the interpretation thereof. But at the last, Daniel came in before me, whose name was Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And before him I told the dream, saying, O Belteshazzar, master of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and no secret troubleth you. Tell me the visions of my dream that I have seen and the interpretation thereof. In verses 4 through 5, the king describes a frightening dream he had at the time when he and his kingdom Babylon are flourishing and prospering in a period of rest and security as the most powerful nation on the planet. You know, there's a scripture that says, and when they shall say peace and safety, sudden destruction shall come on them like a thief in the night. Well, Nebuchadnezzar's about to see a dream of destruction coming. Verse 4, I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house, flourishing in my palace. I saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts upon my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. It is clear that the reason the king's dream terrifies him is evidently it has something to do with a threat to him and his kingdom of Babylon. Yes. So, as recorded in verses 6 and 7, he called for all his mystical occult men of Babylon to interpret his dream. Verse 6, he said, therefore made I a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known unto me the interpretation of the dream. Then came in the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And I told the dream before them, but they did not make known unto me the interpretation thereof. These Babylonian occult mystics could not interpret the king's dream. These mystical practitioners indulge in practices that Israelites are forbidden to do, according to Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 9 through 14, which states, when thou come into the land which Yah the Elohim giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of these nations. There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or daughter to pass through the fire, that uses divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer, a seance person. For all that do these things are an abomination unto Yah. Because of these abominations, Yah the Elohim, that drive them out from before you. You shall be perfect with Yah, your Elohim. For these nations which thou shalt possess, hearken unto observers of times and unto diviners. But as for thee, Yah the Elohim have not suffered thee to do so. The diviners were the psychics. Nebuchadnezzar said, I'm going to turn to my psychics. I'm going to go to the psychic network to figure out what this dream is. But then Nebuchadnezzar saw that his psychic network, his Babylonian mystics, could not interpret the dream. And it says in verse 89 of Daniel 4 that the king calls on the Hebrew prophet Daniel to interpret the dream. Verse 8, but at the last Daniel came in before me, says Nebuchadnezzar, whose name was Belteshazzar, according to the name of my Elohim, and in whom is the spirit of the holy Elohim. And before him, I told the dream, saying, O Belteshazzar, master of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy Elohim is in you, and no secret troubleth you. Tell me the visions of my dream that I have seen, and the interpretation thereof. Verses 8 and 9 reveal that it is clear to Nebuchadnezzar that Daniel the Hebrew was a wiser man than all of the Babylonian wise men, because he says of Daniel in verse 8, in whom is the spirit of the holy Elohim. Now, Nebuchadnezzar is beginning to notice. The king says in verse 9 that because the spirit of the holy Elohim was in Daniel, therefore he said to Daniel that he knew that Daniel had the means to interpret. And so he said, no secret troubles you. Tell me the visions of my dream that I have seen and the interpretation thereof. So the king is confident that the holy Elohim of Daniel, the true Elohim, the Elohim of Israel, he alone could show to Daniel the interpretation of the dream. And the mystical wise men of the false gods of Babylon could not do it. So in verses 10 through 18, the king Nebuchadnezzar tells Daniel the dream. Verse 10, thus were the visions of mine head in my bed. I saw, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and the height thereof was great, and the tree grew and was strong, and the height thereof reached unto heaven, and the sight thereof to the end of all the earth. The leaves thereof were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it was meat for all. The beast of the field had shadow under it, and the fowls of the heaven dwelt in the boughs thereof, and all flesh was fed of it. And I saw in the visions of my head upon my bed, and behold, a watcher, and an holy one came down from heaven. He cried aloud and said thus, hew down the tree and cut off his branches, shake off his leaves and scatter his fruit. Let the beast get away from under it and the fowls from his branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beast in the grass of the earth. Let his heart be changed for man's, and let a beast heart be given unto him, and let 7 times pass over him. This matter is by the decree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giving it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basis of men. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen, Now thou, O Belteshazzar, declare the interpretation thereof, for as much as all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known unto me the interpretation, but thou art able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in you. So in verses 19 through 26, Daniel gives the interpretation of King Nebuchadnezzar's dream. In verse 19, then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was astonished for 1 hour, and his thoughts troubled him. The king spake and said, Belteshazzar, let not the dream or the interpretation thereof trouble thee. Daniel answered and said, my Adonai, the dream be to them that hate you, and the interpretation thereof to thine enemies. The tree that thou sawest, which grew and was strong, whose height reached unto the heaven, and the sight thereof to all the earth, whose leaves were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it was fruit or meat for all, under which the beast of the field dwelt, and upon whose branches the fowls, the birds of the heavens, had their habitation. It is thou, O king, thou art grown and become strong, for thy greatness is grown and reaches unto heaven, and thy dominion to the end of the earth. And was the king saw a watcher and an holy one coming down from heaven, and saying, hew the tree down and destroy it, yet leave the stump of the roots thereof in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass, in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beast of the field, to 7 times pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my master, the king, that they shall drive you from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beast of the field, and they shall make you to eat grass as oxen, and they shall wet thee with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over you, till thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will. And whereas they commanded to leave the stump of the tree roots, thy kingdom shall be sure unto thee, after that thou shalt have known what the heavens, that thou shalt have known that the heavens do rule. So it says in verse 19 that Daniel was greatly troubled and hesitant to explain the dream, out of fear, evidently, that the king would be offended, because there is bad news for the king of Babylon in the interpretation of the dream. And this was troubling to Daniel. And then Daniel, it says, whose name was Belteshazzar, it says in verse 19, he was astonished for 1 hour. That is, for 1 hour before the king, Daniel was afraid to speak. And his thoughts troubled him. And the king noticed, what's with Daniel right now? He's troubled. It's not like he sensed Daniel didn't know what the dream was. He sensed and knew that Daniel knew what it was, but it was information that would be troubling to him, the king of Babylon. But the king of Babylon nonetheless compelled Daniel to give the interpretation of the dream. The king spake and he said to Daniel, let not the dream or the interpretation thereof trouble you. And Daniel immediately notifies the king in verse 19 that this dream's meaning is something that the king's enemies will like. He said, my master, the dream be to them that hate you, and the interpretation thereof to your enemies. Now, at the time of the king's dream, there was an enemy rising to the east of Babylon, and that enemy was called Persia. Persia is today called Iran. So what we're going to see about this dream is a parallel between ancient Babylon and modern America Babylon. In both cases, the Persian Iranian nation In the time of Nebuchadnezzar's ancient Babylon 2,005 years ago, 2,500 years ago, and this current Babylon America both have a major enemy from the east in the Persian Iranian nation. Iran holds parades all the time saying, "Death to the great Satan, America." And they mean what they're saying. So this is a fascinating prophetic parallel of history between ancient Babylon and modern Babylon America, that in both cases, these two nations, ancient Babylon and modern Babylon America, both of them enslaved the Hebrew Israelite people. And both of them have an Eastern enemy in the world, in the nation of Iran. So it was in the ancient past, and so it is now in the present, modern. So this means that the interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream was and is prophetically relevant for his time in ancient Babylon. And this same interpretation of his dream in Daniel 4 is likewise prophetically relevant for our time in modern Babylon, America. So in verse 19, Daniel notifies the king of Babylon that his enemies, who in this case is Iran, would like this interpretation because the dream bears witness to a misfortune that will happen to the king of Babylon. In verses 20 through 22, Daniel interprets the meaning of the great tree in the dream, which is described in verses 20 through 22 as referring to King Nebuchadnezzar. Because it says, "The tree that thou sawest, which grew and was grown, whose heights reached unto the heaven, and the sight thereof to all the earth, whose leaves were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it was fruit for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and upon whose branches the fowls of the heaven had their habitation. It is thou, O king. Thou art grown and become strong, for thy greatness is grown and reaches unto heaven, and thy dominion to the end of the earth." Some of these descriptions of Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon are also descriptions of modern America, Babylon. For instance, historically, Nebuchadnezzar was the greatest ruler of ancient Babylon, which was the greatest nation on the planet in that time. So too, America, Babylon is the greatest nation on the planet now, which grew and was strong. So now America has grown strong. Also, Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon had reached the highest heights of the upper class of the world, as figuratively described as reaching the heights of heaven, whose height, it said, reached unto the heaven, and the sight thereof to all the earth. Babylon, America, has literally reached into the heavens by its space programs and technologies. In verse 21, Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon is described as a fruitful tree that was a habitation and sustainer of food for the creatures of the field, whose leaves, it says in verse 21, were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and it was meat for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and upon whose branches the fowls of the heaven had their habitation. So too, America, Babylon is the most affluent economic hub of the world that people from all around the world desire to immigrate, not just at the border with Mexico are they coming. So Daniel tells Nebuchadnezzar in verse 22 that he, as the king of Babylon, was this great tree. He said, "It is thou, O king, that art grown and become strong, for thy greatness is grown and reacheth unto heaven, and thy dominion to the end of the earth." And so too is the case with Babylon, America. Its greatness is grown and reaches to heaven, and its dominion to the end of the earth. It's got its nose in everybody's business all over the planet, in one way or another. So it is the interpretation in verses 23 through 26 that describes a supernatural intervention in the geopolitical world of Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, which will also become evident in this geopolitical world of modern Babylon, America. Let me repeat myself again. As in verses 23 and 26 of Daniel 4, where it describes a supernatural intervention in the geopolitical world of Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, there's also coming, and be prepared for this. Yah is preparing to do a supernatural intervention in the geopolitical affairs of modern Babylon, America. That's what this chapter is showing us. Because it says in verse 23, whereas the king saw a watcher and a holy one coming down from heaven and saying, hew the tree down and destroy it, yet leave the stump of the roots thereof in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass in the tender grass of the field. Let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beast of the field, till 7 times pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which is come upon my master the king, that they shall drive you from me, and thy dwelling shall be with the beast of the field, and they shall make thee to eat grass as oxen, and they shall wet thee with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over thee, till thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will. And whereas they commanded to leave the stump of the tree roots, thy kingdom shall be sure unto thee, after that thou shalt have known that the heavens do rule. In verse 23, Daniel describes the watchers, a race of supernatural beings who were sent from Yah, the watchers, who made a declaration of judgment on King Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. And so too, the watchers are preparing as we speak to make a decree on Babylon, America. Their decree in Babylon, on Babylon in Daniel's time, was hew the tree down and destroy it. Let the stump of the roots, leave the stump of the roots thereof in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass, in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven. Let his portion be with the beast of the field, to 7 times pass over him. This what we just read is a spiritual revelation of what you can expect is coming to America. A great humbling is coming over America. Notice the judgment to humble Nebuchadnezzar was to chop down Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, but leave the stump of its roots and put a band of iron and brass on the stump. Now that means it's a tree that's chopped down, but it's still a tree that's living, but it's chopped down. See, Yah is chopping America down to size right now, but he's not going to destroy it yet, but he's chopping it down to size, where people aren't as scared of what it does and says as they used to be. There's other nations with weapons that can do mass destruction like it can do. But he says today, the watchers say, chop it down, but don't destroy it. And that's the process Yah's doing on America. He's chopping it down where it doesn't seem to be as influential as it used to be. And this is a clear reference to American modern Babylon in the latter days. Because America is actually a nation that's born out of the stump of the roots of ancient fallen Babylon. That is, if you go to Statuary Hall in Washington, D.C., that was built in 1819, you'll see that there's a statue of a woman called Liberty. And next to her is a stump with a serpent wrapped around it called Asclepius, which is another name for Satan, wrapped around the tree stump. And this is a symbol in the architecture in DC, in Statuary Hall, that America is the fulfillment of ancient Babylon coming back to life in a modern setting. Because the architects of all of the monuments of Washington, D.C. were all Masons, including Benjamin Banneker, the brother that helped design D.C. He was a Mason, Prince Hall. So the Masons borrow architectural schemes and designs from the architectural designs from ancient Babylon of Nebuchadnezzar. And they've got the city set up as a new Babylon. They do in many ways. All right, so it says something else too. When the Watcher says to chop down the tree, don't destroy it, but chop it down to size. Because it said leave the stump, that means it can grow back. It can grow back, but it's going to be humble. But it's going to grow back. But how does it grow back? It said, well, it says put bands of iron and brass on the hewn stump. What does that mean? Why put bands of iron and brass around the hewn stump of Babylon? Well, these are metals that are represented in Daniel chapter 2. And forgive me, beloved, I might be a little long tonight, but we got a lot to talk about tonight. The metals that is described in chapter 2 of Daniel, which were the two metallic parts of the great image that Nebuchadnezzar saw in Daniel chapter 2, verse 39 through 40. These are described as the last two world empires before the coming of the kingdom of Yah. You see, iron and brass represents Euro-Gentile power, because the iron and brass represented the Greco-Roman world system that forms what we call Europe and the European people today. You see the war right now you're seeing between Russia and Ukraine and America and NATO. That's a war between Europeans. They're fighting each other. We need to stay out of it. This is their war. Now, and what's happening is a reconfiguration, a reset of the way they rule the world is getting ready to be implemented. That's what these chains of iron and brass mean, because we know that the kingdom of Greece, which was the great empire of Europe under Alexander, it was represented in the image in Daniel chapter 2 as a belly of brass and thighs of brass in the great image that Nebuchadnezzar saw. And then we see that immediately succeeding it, the Greco power, was the Romans, who are described as the metallic character of iron. And these two world empires we call the Greco-Roman Empire. And so historically, the kingdom of brass represented Greece and the kingdom of iron represented Rome. The Babylonian stump in Daniel 4:23 was wrapped with bands of iron and brass. What does that mean? That means the European nation, they're looking to the resurgent Babylon America to be its savior. And they're wrapping themselves around it to save them from Russia. This is where we are now. But you see, America has been chopped down. It doesn't have the power it used to have. And then we see of the Babylonian stump, it tells us that this indicates then that a resurgent latter-day Babylon, that there's coming a resurgence of America. You see, notice it didn't say chop the tree down and let it die. No, no, no. America is being chopped down right now, but it's coming back. See, Nebuchadnezzar was chopped down in the dream, but he came back. You see what I'm saying? And what we're seeing here is, is that the same is going to happen to America. It is now outmanned militarily with nuclear weapons. Russia got hypersonics. China got hypersonics. America doesn't have them. So missiles can hit here. You see, y'all's chopping down this man's pride. He's chopping it because he always had pride that he could shoot down it. All right. And those nations like Putin and Xi of China, they know this man is being chopped down. They're saying we're not afraid of you anymore. All right. So nonetheless, though, just because America's chopped down doesn't mean it's yet at its end. A resurgent America through a unification of European nations to it under the umbrella of military defense is what you have with NATO, which is where the nations in the West, all the bands of gold are the bands of iron and brass, the Euro-Gentile powers of Europe. They band together under this stump of a resurgent Babylon, America. This is what this lesson is telling us tonight. Clearly, American Babylon is the resurgent Babylon of the last days. And it will get a new leader. America will get a new leader. But in this government will change. It won't be the American government that you and I grew up knowing. It's going to be a resurgent America. It's been humbled. It's now licking its wounds. And it's now ready to engage in another resurgence. In verses 23 through 26, Nebuchadnezzar's personal life is used as an illustration of the prophetic process of how the fallen historical Babylon, or as the modern Babylon, America, would resurge after it's been humbled. And then it describes in verse 23 through 26 of Daniel 4 how a beast-hearted ruler will emerge out of America to be the king of America for 7 years. And this is a king that the scriptures call the Antichrist. He's at hand to come now. Because it said in verse 16, let his heart be changed from man's, and let a man's heart be given unto him, and let 7 times pass over him. This is a clear reference how the Antichrist, the beast ruler of Revelation 13, will rule latter-day Babylon, America for 7 years. And it said, let his portion be with the beast of the field, to 7 times pass over him. Daniel says, this is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my master the king. So Nebuchadnezzar's personal life is used as an example of the Antichrist rule of America. In Nebuchadnezzar's life, it's an illustration of how the Babylonian Empire will reemerge in America. It's cited by the stump being wrapped with the iron and breast Greco-Roman European powers of the West today in NATO. The founders of America saw America as the new Babylon coming out of the stump of the old Babylon, just as we could see in the architecture, statuary hall in DC. And so today, Daniel explains the dream to Daniel about this period of time that will be happening to America. And we're here to say tonight, beloved, that before this beast comes, before this ruler comes, America is about to be severely humbled. Things in the coming days ahead are going to be somewhat heartbreaking of events you're going to see in the world. You're going to see horrible things, frightening things, nuclear things that are coming. And yet, nonetheless, the Elohim of Israel is using you to serve notice to America. Because you see what's getting ready to happen, beloved. Yah's taking America down until America wakes up and realizes who you are. And realizes and recognizes that they owe you for what they did to your forefathers. And that the only way they can redeem themselves from being destroyed by Russia and China, all the other nations, they got to learn to do right by you. See, all this that you're seeing in the news is still centered around you. It is all being foretold as it's shown in Daniel in real time. And at some point, and at some time, very soon, I am convinced, there's going to be an American leader. Maybe it's Biden, I don't know, who's going to have an experience with the Watchers. See, the Watchers know who you are. They've seen you from the days of Daniel and Jeremiah. They've seen you through the slave ship experiences of your forefathers. The Watchers have seen it all, and they know who you are. As Yah told Jeremiah, Yah says, I got a future for you. Even though right now it looks like America doesn't have a future, Yah's not going to destroy it yet till he arranges for your redemption. It could be there could be an American leader who could have an experience by decree of the Watchers like Nebuchadnezzar did. I don't know. All I know is that the United States government is having problems with these unidentified flying objects always going around their nuclear sites, always going around their naval sites. And they don't know what it is, or at least they're acting like they don't. That is beyond the technology in the nation on the earth. Could this be the Watchers? Time will tell. But in the meantime, I'm here to say to you tonight, beloved, Yah did say, in the days of Gog, I will remember my covenant. I will remember my covenant I made with Abraham to redeem you. And so tonight, as we reflect on these matters, let us rejoice as we come into the feast season. This is going to be quite a fascinating feast season, beloved. And let us review the promise of the blood covenant of Yahshua for us as a nation and as individuals, that he is faithful and true to redeem us out of this Babylon America and to bring us back home to our beloved homeland of Israel. Hallelujah.